important for me to get to the point where I could actually tell my father I loved him. That meant a lot to me, because let's say, inside the bro code, the script says, you can just call down and that's how you express the love. When your buddy is doing something, an individual action that you would like to discourage him against, but you still want to express for them the love of them as a person, when you want to correct behavior, when you want to address the bystander effect, when you want to actually challenge elements of their personality without their personhood that is perpetuating rape culture, how do you do that inside the script?
I actually can speak to that a little bit. So I had a roommate first year who used a lot of the language that makes me and I think a lot of other people feel really uncomfortable. And we still to this day are very good friends. And we're at the point now where not only that roommate who still lives with me, but the other housemates in my house have started to catch each other when they say some of the words. The way that I personally did it, again, I can only speak from my own experience, and staying inside of scripts and not making it feel like a confrontational thing, is when someone would say, that's so gay, or I raped that test, or something like that, which happens way too often. I would just ask them what they mean, or eventually after I called them out several times, because it would happen every day, I would start just looking at them and giving them the mic look, where I was the mom of the room. They'd say something and be like, and then they'd just be like, oh, sorry, and then a couple months later, they got to the point where my whole house stopped saying stuff like that. And proudest moment of my entire life, earlier this year in September, one of my housemates caught one of their friends on the phone saying it and asked them what they meant by it. And I was just like, wow, this actually works, and they still don't hate me, right? I'm still bros with that person, but you can approach it in a way, whether you're using humor, whether you're just giving them a look or something like that, and just constantly reminding them in a very gentle way, that eventually they start to question, well, why are you asking me not to say that? And coming to personal realizations.
And it's a way to, underneath that and what that comment is, it's a way of expressing an emotion. When someone says, I really hate that I have to say this, but that's okay. They're expressing an emotion. They mean something else. So I think unpacking that and saying, what do you really mean? And, like you said, rethinking how we express emotions. And it's really important to have compassion, too, when you're looking at those situations, and to recognize where people are in their learning. We're sitting up here and, we're, part, and I think, well, most of you, I don't want to speak to everyone's learning experience, but are part of an enlightened community. We sort of know, okay, this isn't acceptable, but not everyone sees themselves in that gradient. And I can see myself in every part of, the gradient, where, I probably said things about, mental health and sexuality that were very, not okay at one time in my life. So it's important to recognize where people are in their learning, and to have compassion and recognize that it's a way of redirecting how we're expressing an emotion.
All I want to say is, since high school, I was totally that kid in high school who was use gay as a term. I never thought about it in terms of it having anything to do with homosexuality. It was just a word. But now that I've been at university, I've tried to stop saying that, and I've succeeded. But what I just realized right here in this moment is that I've replaced it with the word lame, which the same way I didn't think about gay people when I said something was gay, I don't think about people with disabilities when I use the word lame. But it's an evolution of language that I think at some level the word is always going to, if you're expressing a negative feeling, there's going to be a negative association.
I think you speak to you're replacing it with a new word, and it's daunting because there's so many words, and it feels like, how do we understand all these different things? But I remember the editor for a section of the Globe and Mail, this guy, my mom's friend, said this quote that stuck with me about that daunting feeling. There's so many words I need to stop saying. How do I keep up with this? But he said, if we all spoke conscientiously, then none of us would need to speak conscientiously. And it's in essence, that really means just work at it. Just slowly work at it, and work at it within your world and the worlds of the people around you. And slowly we're all going to get to that point where we've eliminated that bad language and we eliminated where it starts. And so it's a huge project, but it's totally worthwhile because it's not that hard.
Do you have a follow-up question to that?
I was just gonna say that this is actually a perfect example of why I think it's important to reintegrate an emotional intelligence and dialogue into masculinity. Because the need for another word, that's so gay, that's so lame, is because what you actually mean to say is, I'm really personally upset and troubled when I see this. And the moment that you can actually express yourself in the emotional terms, you don't need a pejorative. And so the entire question of that rolling pejorative, which group am I going to clip, stops as soon as you can talk about yourself in honest terms.
Yeah, I think that's such an important piece. It's about men giving themselves and each other permission to grow emotional literacy, right? Because it's not that guys don't have emotions, right? Because people think that young boys, oh, they're just like, they don't have any emotion or whatever. There's like a storm of emotion that is so buried inside their chest. Like I was saying earlier, how a friend of mine used the phrase how this negative, toxic idea of manhood is like this heavy, masculine rib cage that is crushing your heart. So our bodies are rejecting our hearts. And I think it's recognizing that, it's about, again, giving us ourselves this ability to explore our vocabulary emotionally, to be able to talk about these things and just even go from I feel weird to I feel really weird. And then it's like,
Yeah, it's baby steps.
baby steps.
I don't know if this is too far stretched or if you guys have any opinions on this, but in terms of emotional intelligence and emotional literacy, how these masculine pressures and scripts play into access to mental health care and specifically men reaching out for help. And I think there's great work being done in terms of the stigma of mental health, but then it's cool for me as a girl to go see a therapist, but it's not cool for my dad to go talk to one. So what do you guys have to think about that, I guess?
I'm so happy you brought that up. Yes, thank you. No, that's such a big part of it. I'm comfortable in my masculinity, and I'm comfortable to say that I have used HCDS and gone to a counselor, and that's helped me through. But again, not everyone has the privilege of being comfortable with that, and that's because of the ways that we talk about masculinity and emotional intelligence. It's not cool for a guy or a bro to stand up in a room and say, I need help. It's not cool for them to go to a counselor or to go to a resource on campus and say, hey, this is something that I'm struggling with, and I would like to talk to you about it so that you can help me feel better. I think what the more common thing is for it just to be repressed and to internalize it and to maybe make yourself busy and do other things. Maybe it's playing sports, maybe it's getting involved in clubs. And I was guilty of that earlier in my life as well. When I wasn't as comfortable coming to terms with that, I would just internalize everything, and it wasn't going to help my reputation or my public persona if I was going to talk about it or tell anyone about it. So I would just keep it internal, and I would get involved in lots of things so I wouldn't have time to think about it. And then it just got too overwhelming. And so when I came to terms with the fact that it doesn't make me any less of a human being or a man or whatever you want to call me, to get the help that I have the right to, that I have access to, like any other person on this campus, that's when I started to feel better. But that's a huge part of it, because emotional intelligence and the way that we talk about emotions in terms of masculinity, it makes it very hard to reach out.
Do you want to open it up?
Okay. I'll say this really quickly, but I'm really glad that you asked that, and I think when men are hesitant to seek help with their own mental health and to talk about that, it's a negative thing for everybody, really. And I mean, from my own experience, I had a lot of guys in my life who were putting that stuff down or being oh, that's for getting help with that and going to talk to somebody, that's bullshit, that means that you're weak, and that put me in a position where it's I need help, but you're all gonna think I'm crazy. So you get into a position where there's something that is a barrier and that's oppressing us, and then you internally oppress yourself. And I think when men and women are in that environment where that's not okay, it's really bad for everybody. So I think having this conversation where men can openly talk about their mental health and talk about their emotions, it's good for everybody.
I just have a comment about what Mike said about internalizing everything. I think that it's really just a terrible cycle, because And it's just cyclical because you internalize your feelings and your need for help, and that leads to lashing out and potentially just using the emotions of anger and aggression against your friends, and end up hurting your friends and hurting the people that you're close to, that you might be able to reach out to and actually talk to about things. And it's just kind of like a vicious cycle. And I don't really have a question, but I just thought I'd mention that because I think it's terrible.
Yeah, whether it's spider running
Preach.
That's a physical health, like.
I'm actually just curious because you said that like we did negotiate or whatever. But I feel like for a lot of guys, we get to a point where we're not actually like bursting at the seams. We're always just like we're held at bay. So like something happens, and then we have like some bizarre outlet to take it out on or deal with it, and then we're good. And then but like I think over time we are kind of hurting ourselves. So at what point, or how do we like, I guess, get the stigma? Not wait. Okay. I mean, how? At what point are we? Is it okay for guys to just be like, oh, like it's not a thing? You know what I mean?
I think it's just being honest with yourself. I think we're talking about a lot of things today, and maybe something one thing that someone says that helps them isn't going to help everyone. And so I think it's never going to hurt to look yourself in the mirror and just try to be honest with yourself and say, who am I? What do I need to do to feel good? Be honest with yourself about about what you like. And it's not going to happen overnight, but like someone who goes for runs to deal with, we all deal with our stress in different ways. And I think it's always healthy to just try new things and try not to let the stigma that other people might put on something affect you, and then just try and see if it works for you. And if it doesn't, that's okay, I think.
To very, very quickly, address the stigma portion and something that someone said earlier. And I hate this word when it's used in this context, especially, but again, it's just what people say. Like when guys want to access mental health, they're often deemed a pussy, and when girls want to access it, they're deemed a drama queen. So there is a stigma attached no matter what. And I think it's also important to recognize that not all guys or all girls will experience mental health or grapple with it in the same way. But again, like you said, it is a lot just being honest with yourself.
I feel like you had your hand up forever.
How you spoke earlier about guys are so afraid of being labeled as, oh, we might, like, they might think we're gay, and it's a very negative connotation. And I think that's a big part of where queerness and mental health intersects in terms of can't talk right now, gender expression. Because I feel like a really big toxic stereotype of masculinity is stagnation. Like with women, it's very fluid. You know, sexuality is fluid. They can make out with a girl at a party. Like they can be like, oh, I have like bipolar. You know, there is definitely still a stigma, but for women, it's a lot easier for them to get help. And so a big part of the stereotype of masculinity is stagnation, of always being one way or another. And isn't that in bro culture too? Like you are this way, absolutely, you are for the bros. Like it's a very separate, divided sense of being and divided sense of like the way of thinking. And there's no fluidity. There's no room for any sort of like emotional flexibility.
Yeah, if you kiss a guy once, you're almost gay for the rest of your life, and that's like the example of it.
And with girls, that doesn't exist. It's so fluid.
Yeah, and that doesn't let people. And the same thing, if you express your emotions once, you're a pussy for the rest of your life, and so you're so right. I think.
You've had your hand up for a while.
I just want to mention on the topic of like poor representation in terms of males seeking help with mental health issues. I think for every female who sees a counselor, there's probably dozens more females who are like informally counseled by their friends because they tend to be like express things more, which is great. There's also females who may be more introverted and don't have friends they're comfortable talking about those issues with, or maybe they're maybe like men, like overly proud and don't want to ask for help. But I think, like Mike was saying, like beyond gender stereotypes, there's also this issue of just everyone understanding that talking helps. So I feel like beyond just trying to get men to not think they have to be a certain way, we also have to encourage everyone to just try talking, because it does help a lot.
In the back.
I just wanted to say, like, thank you so much for saying it's a privilege to be able to be comfortable with your masculinity, to be able to express your emotions, because I have a lot of guy friends that aren't able to do that, but my younger brother is. He's very effeminate, and he's quite happy to show his emotions. He's quite happy to tell his friends or all the guys that he loves them. And, like, even what Rory said when we were younger, my mom asked me, like, Zenia, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I want to be an astronaut. She asked him, and he goes, I want to be a mommy, just because we were lucky to grow up in an environment where we were given the affection we wanted. He always wanted a lot of affection. Like, he's 6'2", built like a nuclear bunker, and he's a gentle giant. Like, if you see him play rugby, it's hilarious because he doesn't like to hurt people. And that's his masculinity. And so yeah, thank you so much for saying it's a privilege to be able to be comfortable with that, because I know it feeds into his mental health too. I know how happy he can always be. So it's, yeah.
I'm really glad that you brought that up, and like again, it is a product of how I grew up, and my parents did an awful job of maintaining gender roles, because my mom was literally, she called herself Mega Bitch 3000, and my dad was a very soft-spoken guy, and the man of our house was Elton John, because that's all that ever happened in our house. So I had a very unique understanding of what gender meant, in the sense that like I didn't ever really think about what guys should be and what girls should be, and that's something that I'm very lucky to have, and I recognize that not a lot of people have that same upbringing.
Yeah, and it makes you, like, you feel sad and you feel anxious when you think, you know, you are a way that's not okay. Like, I grew up and I was super creative and, like, I wasn't very feminine. Like, I wore a lot of overalls and sweatpants, and, you know, I didn't really do, like, little girl things, and, like, that wasn't always something that was acceptable. And I think a lot of the times, like when I was a kid, like, and I was certain places, like, that would make me sad or that would make me anxious. So having discussions like this where you want to think through how can we give people the freedom to be who they want to be, because it has an impact on their mental health and on just how they see themselves fitting into the world. Emma?
Two more?
Yeah, back home, I have a big group of guy friends that are kind of like a token bro, and they always seem to come to me to talk about it, but don't really talk amongst themselves. I'm just kind of like wondering how, like, I guess anybody or just like the panel also feel just like it seems that, at least in my experience, anytime one of my guy friends has them, they come to me. They always talk to me about their things. So, you know, when their parents have been getting divorced, they always come to me and talk about their feelings instead of talking like as a group or with some of the other guys. And like they've known longer. They've known me for 5 years. They've gone to elementary school together. They always feel more comfortable speaking to me, maybe because I'm a woman, or I'm just like, maybe that's just who I am in their life. And the person they talk to. I'm wondering if you guys do any relationships or any feelings about that kind of idea.
Well, I feel like it's also to do with, like, people always go talk to Mike, and people always come talk to me as well, and it's a lot to do with just the way you accept, encourage, and reward honesty and openness. So it has a lot to do with you as a person, I think. So they look around, they say, who can I talk to, and it's really very clear.
Just really quickly, just because again, it's in talking to you, I don't feel, the guy doesn't feel the threat of losing his man card. Talking to another guy, it's like, oh, my man card's slipping out of my hand, because I have to quickly, again, assert, perform, maintain, maintain, 24/7.
Maintain.
Maintain.
I like that, man. That's
Fiona and Nick and there was a lady in the back there. Alex?
You want me to start?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry, just bringing this conversation back to what the call guy said. You.
That must be you.
Is that my tall? Thank you.
Said was, that I thought was interesting, just said mental health, on a whole, is that I was recently reading an article, because you were saying, just one of the stigmas is, like, going to talk, like, you want everyone to have a chance to talk, like, even though girls have a chance, like you were saying, also to, they're less pressure to not talk to someone, still means that some of them aren't talking to people, though, right, when they should be. And I was reading an article recently it's interesting that talking, like people would rather go on medication than talk to people. That was just like a random comment that I wanted to put in.
I totally understand that because when I got to university, I had made myself into this bro, and I thought that was what was going to be perpetuated in university. I thought I was preparing myself for university. Then when I got here, I realized that I was kind of, without the high school bros with me, I was kind of had my ass hanging in the wind, and I was going through an identity crisis. I didn't even know it, and I knew that there was something wrong, but I didn't go and talk to anyone. I didn't, and I think that is something that we always say is like, go talk to someone, express yourself. But there's a lot of people out there who would rather just try to get through it on their own, and I don't think we have to make